Go ahead, Mr. Cataract.
It's a few seconds after 6:30, so we'll go ahead and get started with the Raymore City Council work session for Monday, June the 1st. We have 3 items on our agenda, and I know we have another item under other that Mr. Zur, who is on his way, will be covering for us tonight. But with that said, we'll start off with item A and the discussion of the August 4th, 2020 no tax increase bond issue. Mr. Fearborn.
Thank you, Your Honor. We had discussed earlier when we were talking about putting the no tax increase issue on the ballot that we could take one of two stances, that there were processes in place relative to tomorrow's election that would allow, should the election results not be overly favorable, for us to then pull back from the August election. After a considerable amount of discussion with the mayor and kind of doing full cycles myself on this thing, going back and forth relative to it, at this point in time, regardless of the results of the election, where I had gotten to was only if everything went down tomorrow and did not pass, would I be recommending to you all that we remove our item from the August ballot. At this point in time, just in my heart, I gotta believe that retracting like that would send a really bad signal about how much we believe in the items that are on this issue. So at this point in time, I'd be recommending to the council that regardless of the results tomorrow, we go full steam ahead. That's who we've been before. We believe in the items 8-0 that we've put on this ballot. We know the significance of how the items that are on this particular no tax increase ballot issue are going to help our citizens all over the city. And so if I hear no objection to you all at the June 15th work session, we will be giving you our campaign strategy and our informational campaign and just moving forward full steam ahead on this particular issue, unless I would hear otherwise tonight.
Yeah, you know, just to kind of follow up on that, Jim and I had a fairly long conversation about this, and I feel strongly that the items that you all have approved on the list are really things that a lot of our community from time to time will be asking us about. What are you going to do here? What are you going to do there? It's such a great package, and it still is a no tax increase general obligation bond that I feel like it can live on its own. It doesn't need to be hurt by any other measures that are coming around. So that's why he and I have really discussed that, and I was glad that he took the position that he did to relay to you all. Does anybody else have anything they'd like to say? Sonia?
I'll just add that I agree with that wholeheartedly. I think that all of the items on there are beneficial for people all across the city. I think when my hesitation before, when we talked about whether to maybe put the brakes on, was expecting what I felt like a possible worse downturn in the economy than we're having. And if we got to that point where people were saying, this is a huge recession, nobody wants to spend any money, the city can't afford to pay its regular bills, why are they spending money on these projects? You know, that was kind of the scenario that I was picturing, where we might say, let's wait. But it doesn't seem to be that bad. I don't get that feeling from people. You know, we talked through finances last time, so I'm totally in favor of that.
Thank you. Jay?
Thank you, sir. I would concur with the general philosophy of the statements. I believe this is a carpe diem moment. Our issues passed in the range of 80% on both ballots last time. Even if we were to see a little bit of a downturn, still going to easily pass if we have that same kind of sentiment that turns out. I believe people believe in Raymore. We've had no retraction from what's happened so far, and I think it would be a mistake to step back at this point. So I concur wholeheartedly, sir.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Townsend.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I also want to add my comments as well. Being on the Transportation Committee and understanding the impacts of having this GO bond be on the ballot and hopefully get voted into approval by the residents is a win for us going forward, particularly with all the transportation projects to help our community, where the Ward Parkway on the east side of our community, with the 163rd. All those different elements are crucial to the infrastructure of the city, which also lends itself to the growth of the city. Even though we're having some challenges with the pandemic and how that's impacting businesses, we're still investing because of the strength of our books and how our finances have been rated AAA, I believe, A2, which is still good, which is the best for our population size. Until we grow, we'll be able to increase that credit rating. But I believe with all these projects, being in the transportation and in the parks, it's responding to the residents' requests that we've had on several surveys to put those things in place. And we've done what we said we were going to do with the 2016 GO bond. We're going to do what we said we're going to do with this 2020 GO bond. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. Move on to item B, the Spirit of America celebration.
Thank you, sir. The Spirit of America celebration, you will remember, was second read a couple of council meetings ago, and at that council meeting, Mr. Mustine indicated to the council and to the mayor that the vendor was prepared to, basically, our show was boxed and ready, and it was that they are prepared to, at any time, and were then, if we ended up having to cancel the July 3rd show, they were prepared at the exact same price. If we wanted to go at another date or an entire cancellation, they understood that. I think that they were just very relieved that at least one community was staying with them. With the extension of the governor's order to now June 15th and the cancellation of a number of the really high-profile shows besides ours that are going to go on, the fact that in consultation with county health, we understood that while we would probably be able to have the shoot, social distancing, however that would have to take place. We could have no food trucks. They weren't going to be able to use the playground equipment, all of the things that make the day the day. So as we were pondering that, even before Independence closed their show, and thinking about how are we going to get all these extra people into there, the chief actually came up with the idea when we were looking at the calendar for rescheduling that Friday night, September 11th, might be a very great day to have our Spirit of America celebration. We would be past things. We could celebrate first responders. So what we're looking to do is get the council's kind of thumbs up to go to the park board and make that recommendation between myself and Mr. Mustine. The only thing that might modify that, we could still call it the September 11th Patriots Day Spirit of America celebration, but maybe we have it on the Saturday the 12th so that we can have an entire day celebration with it as well, just like we do the Friday night. We would be a little bit limited and could possibly be in conflict with Friday night football. We still haven't established those two just yet, but we would definitely be making recommendation to the council that you give us the thumbs up for September 11th or September 12th and celebrating our first responders on that date instead.
Mr. Burke.
Just since I had no idea what we were going to be presented with, this is just a gut reaction. My feeling is that it's a great idea, but the uncertainty of where we're going to be at if we have school again in the fall, and what's going to happen by September 11th, I almost feel like we're in our community in a good place right now, and typically people sit on blankets and they kind of block out an area for their family, and then some other families are, you know, a ways away. I wonder if we couldn't have it in July, but I don't know.
Our concern with July at this point in time isn't whether we could have it, but it would only be able to be the fireworks shoot. There wouldn't be the food trucks, there wouldn't be, we had even discussed the possibility of having people stay in their cars. The problem is, all of those shows that have been canceled, those people are gonna try to get in. And so we anticipate there's going to be a point in time where we actually have to shut it off and tell people, we know you drove in here from Independence, but you gotta go home. And that's gonna, I can't even remember how Mr. Ike put it, but the picture of one of our officers standing on top of a barricade at Lucy Webb and School Road, telling people you gotta go home, probably isn't the image we wanna be projecting.
Okay, that makes sense. I didn't quite, I thought that's what we were saying, but I wasn't super clear. So that does make sense. I know when my children were little, some officers had to ask them to get off of the top of the roof of the thing at the playground that we're replacing. So you would have trouble stopping children from doing, but I wonder what will happen with personal fireworks. Will people think that they can shoot off fireworks on September 11th? And I don't know.
We
Anyway.
would actually be coming back to the council with the window, and no, they wouldn't be. I mean, the council has an established code for
Right.
when people can, and none of this stops them from their personal celebrations.
In July.
Those are still on.
Okay.
We're gonna be bringing the fireworks tents to you all at the next week at the council meeting for the ones that have put in application. I think we're down one fireworks tent. We actually expected there to be a ton of folks come in and apply. But as I said, we're down one tent. I believe Ms. Harmer put it best that by the time we get to the 4th of July and the window that you all already have approved in code, people are really gonna be ready to blow things up here in the city, so.
Thank you. I just wanted to kind of start the discussion.
Mr. Circo.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I concur. That's a great idea, Chief. Going into September, I think you get June, July, and August, you get the summer and the heat. We're very positive. We're going the right direction in this country, in our community, state, our cities. I think it's a great idea, because by then, I think you're going to see a very openness to the people, and they're going to be really relaxed. Things will be coming back. The market's going to be better. Finance is going to be better, and they're going to be looking for something very special, and be able to get out and do that at that time when it's still warm, and be able to possibly have the kids playing on the playground and all that. I think that's a remarkable, great idea, and I'm all for it.
Mr. Berenson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I also agree that I think changing it to September may be a great idea. I do like the date of the 12th better than the 11th, personally. My only question is, are we more likely in September, and this may not even be a big issue, but are we more likely to be in more of a drought season and have more fire restrictions and burn restrictions? And does that affect our shooting of fireworks? If there's a burn ban, does that affect the show at all?
Go ahead.
The burn bans definitely affect shooting off fireworks, even sometimes, I'm sure you probably remember some of those years, even around 4th of July, when people shoot off personal fireworks. If there's burn bans, then obviously we have to be very careful. And we work, closely with the vendors, because, they make sure that they, wet the ground and things like that. But if it's just really dry and really hot, like it is sometimes even in July, we have to be very careful.
So we don't think I know we're thinking really far ahead here, but if we're in a season that's more likely to be drought prone and have a burn ban, is there a chance that the show could get canceled because of a bad enough burn ban, or do they have ways around that?
There are always contingencies for that, sir.
Okay.
Yeah, we would put it, normally what we do is we put it off a week. The wind affects the burn ban as well, but with any luck, one of the nice parts about this one too is the sun's setting earlier. So we would actually have a larger window to have the shoot, but as Chief indicated, the vendors understand that that is something that they're working under at any time, whether it be July or whether it be September.
Okay. It's just a very, very small concern, but I overwhelmingly support changing it to September regardless. And again, I think putting it on Saturday instead of Friday because the football season's a great idea. Thank you for that.
Mr. Barber. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I think it's a very creative idea. One thing about 2020 this year is we're used to things being put off, so it's kind of the, not want to say the new normal, it's just the normal this year. And I like the idea of not just canceling it, but looking forward to having it. My question would be is, our expectation, if we did do it on that Saturday, would just be like our normal 4th of July, that when we do our fireworks celebration, the food trucks, everything would be as normal as it, at least that's the expectation.
That is absolutely the hope. The message that we would be sending, everybody was very, very disappointed with the cities who've gone out so far because it's just been an outright cancellation, budget, et cetera. As Councilmember Del Gawad brought up, the budget considerations are not the same city by city, and we're certainly in a very good spot right now. So our message would be, we're not canceling, we're postponing it so that we can give the citizens of Raymore and the people in attendance the full experience of the show on a meaningful date. We hope to be able to bring everything to them that was going to be on the original day.
Mr. Holman.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Fearborn, by that date, would we have the tower from City Hall down, and would Mr. Icky have the new smoker built out of those bricks for the celebration, is my question.
I hope so, sir. Unrelated but related, very large chips are falling off the tower, so we've actually mobilized the company even before you all second read and approval of that. Mr. Quaddy is walking into my office every morning with scoopfuls of these things, and this heavy rain didn't help. So, yeah, we're mobilizing them ahead of time so that on Tuesday morning they're starting on tearing the tower down.
Anyone else? About the fireworks? Okay. Next item is the June 8th City Council meeting.
We just wanted to remind the city council and make another recommendation to you in these trying times. Next week at the council meeting, it is the always strange double council meeting where we have a regular meeting to handle at the beginning to handle one special item, and then we have a special meeting to handle the regular business of the council. It's just very, very odd. Because we're going to still be in here, the problem that we have is, you'll remember that in between the two meetings, always in the past, it's been our tradition to have just a very brief reception. We can't turn the camera off and turn it back on here once we're committed to the meeting. So I was hoping that the council would acquiesce to, in this particular year, under these circumstances, to just simply moving from one meeting, adjourning one meeting and going directly into the special meeting after that, if you all are okay with that.
Everybody good? Yeah. Yes, no cake and cookies or?
We'll have them at your spots, sir, and prepackaged.
There you go. I like that. Yeah.
Little juice boxes.
There you go.
Sort of.
All right. Anything else on that particular item?
That is all, sir.
Okay. All right. Well, I think we actually have a couple of other items. Did you want to bring something up, Reg, under other, or did you want to wait for the attorney's presentation? Okay. All right. Mr. Zur, I would turn it over to you. I think you're going to give us a kind of an update on House Bill 1854 can do to us?
I'm happy to do so, Your Honor. Thank you very much, and my apologies for being slightly tardy this evening. The time for the meeting was hiding in plain sight with me, so again, my apologies. I have been asked to provide information with regard to the House Bill 1854, which has been truly passed and forwarded along to the governor for potential approval. This is an omnibus bill that includes a large number of items within it, many of which may negatively impact upon municipalities, including the city of Raymore. It's my goal to kind of provide a quick overview of, here are some high points of the bill, and then I'll pass it along to Mr. Fearborn and back to you, Mayor, for additional follow-up. But from an overview, I wanted to start with a discussion regarding Wayfair. Originally, it was noted that this bill was likely going to be the fix for Wayfair, which would have allowed for taxation for internet sales. During a period of time in the past, prior legislative sessions, the state income tax offset was always thrown in there as an obstacle for passing Wayfair. In this particular go-around, they thought that they were going to have movement, according to Richard Sheets, the lobbyist for the Missouri Municipal League, based upon some give and hope for progress. During the course of the legislative session, it appeared that the Wayfair, rather than being tied directly to the state income tax offsets, also became tied to municipal video cable franchise fees. Dozens of lobbyists to spread the notion that Wayfair dollars would more than make up for the lost video cable fee revenues, essentially a local revenue offset. There are many reasons why tying video cable franchise fees to Wayfair is a bad idea, but the main misconception is that revenue from a Wayfair fix is somehow new municipal revenue that needs to be counterbalanced somewhere else. Basically, Wayfair is seeking to replenish or replace municipal lost revenues from online sales as opposed to the sales that used to occur more commonly at local brick and mortar shops. It's not a new revenue source, it's simply offsetting what has been lost. Ultimately, both Wayfair and the video cable fee offsets suggested were pulled from the final omnibus bill before approval and delivery to the governor, which occurred on the 27th of last month, so Wayfair is yet to be fought for another day. Numerous organizations, because this was an omnibus bill, there are all kinds of things that have been thrown into it, which gave a very difficult time for citizen input, especially given the time frame that the legislature is working, where they are actively telling individuals not to come down and participate in the legislative process. Because of the unique factors of COVID-19 and how the legislature worked in the passage of both House Bill 1854 as well as a number of other bills that were large lump bills, there have been numerous organizations that have submitted an open letter to the Missouri Attorney General opposing the method by which the large omnibus bills were passed and the lack of transparency and involvement from the citizenry. They argued that during these restrictive times where the public was actively discouraged from involvement at the Capitol due to COVID, that the only actions appropriate for the legislature were on approval of a budget and addressing COVID issues specifically. I believe that's generally what we did here as a municipality. The remainder of House Bill 1854 still contains a number of provisions which may negatively impact municipalities. First and foremost, it modifies the required ballot language for the submission of a local use tax to voters by requiring a reference to the elimination of the disparity in tax rates collected by local and out-of-state sellers by imposing the same rate on all sellers. This isn't necessarily a negative impact, and according to the fiscal note that went along with House Bill 1854, this would generally have no fiscal impact. It may make it more clear for voters in the future for the individual municipalities that decide they want to try and pass a use tax under its current guise. It also establishes the Missouri Local Government Expenditure Database, requiring municipalities to provide information on all expenditures after December 31st, 2022. It's a voluntary process, although the city can be forced to be a part of it if 5% of the registered voters within such municipality request it. Not necessarily helpful, and in fact, Kansas City officials, as part of the fiscal note, indicated that this section would have a negative impact on the city of an indeterminate amount of money. The city already publishes on its website mostly. This would be in data collection as far as the additional costs were concerned. You'd find the additional costs in data collection, personnel, and additional software to make the required reports. Of real focus for you all this evening is how House Bill 1854 addresses TDDs and CIDs, Transportation Development Districts, Community Improvement Districts. Under the current law, a TDD and a CID are allowed to impose a sales tax on purchases made within the boundaries of the district. Right now, it requires approval by a majority of the voters living within that district. If approved by the governor, House Bill 1854 would require approval of such a proposed tax by a majority of the voters of the city where the district is located. This is not helpful from the perspective of a transportation development district or a community improvement district in funding. In fact, it makes it an additional extreme hurdle for you to be able to do so. The cost for a municipal-wide election would depend upon the size of the municipality and could range anywhere from $11,000 for a town such as Parkville to $600,000 for a city such as Kansas City. Again, these costs would all be incurred by the district, but it's just one more factor that imposes difficulty with regard to approval if House Bill 1854 is approved. There's also a provision specific to TDDs. Currently, a TDD is allowed to charge and collect tolls or fees for the use of a project if approved by a majority of voters within the district. If approved by the governor, House Bill 1854 would require approval of such a proposed fee or toll by a majority of voters within the city where the TDD is located. Again, it's making it more difficult for the TDD to be able to impose these funding options that are allowed under the current statutes. Again, the cost also would be borne by the district itself, but would require a municipal-wide election, so therefore the cost of putting it on the ballot. House Bill 1854 also includes a provision which provides for the expansion of the candidate filing period for a political subdivision by 1 week. Instead of required filing deadlines for the 17th Tuesday, it would be the 16th Tuesday. This was noted in the fiscal note as not having any fiscal impact according to the Budget Office. Finally, it also requires the municipality-owned utility provide the customer name, billing address, location of service, and dates of service provided for any commercial account. Not necessarily helpful for the city, but also not very shocking either. All of these would have potentially been available under sunshine requests as it was. As noted above, the bill has been truly agreed, finally passed. It's been delivered to the governor for approval, and I believe that's where your discussion will occur this evening. Pass that back over.
The bill has been passed, as Mr. Zur indicated, like many omnibus bills, a significant number of flaws to it. It is more than 30 entities, noted the fact that there was horrible public input allowed before this thing actually went up for its final vote. One of the issues in it is that while it now expands the election for a TDD or a CID to the entire population of the city, the CID and TDD Act are still in effect, and they did not remove the wording from those two acts that says the vote is by persons who live within the CID or TDD district only. So you have conflicting wording, should the governor sign this into law, between those two, that would necessarily point to the fact that it wasn't a well-thought-out piece of legislation. From the standpoint of, as you all can imagine, we are at constant loggerheads on this side of the state with competition from Kansas, who necessarily have things already built into their state law that give them certain advantages over the baselines that Missouri would be able to give them, where we need at the local level to be able to make a determination on the council's part. It removes that local ability to make a decision on how much those amounts are going to be, or whether or not it's going to, what you would approve based on the conversations between the major stakeholders in this. So the competition with Kansas, we would once again be falling behind. Neither the MARC organization nor the Gateway organization relative to competition with Illinois were consulted about this and where they would want to see the legislation go. The legislation that I think when Wayfair fell off along with the franchise fees, I think what they thought the new compromises were going to be, well, we're going to remove the local control relative to the TDD and the CID, but at the same time, we're going to put in this more favorable ballot language that before this, if you were going to try to pass a use tax, it was, the wording that you had to use was a no vote means yes and a yes vote means no. It was one of those confusing pieces of legislation. But all this has done is make a yes vote a yes vote. Other than that, it's pretty much familiar with what was there before. So just some considerations, and Mr. Zer and I would be open to any questions you might have. And then I know the mayor has some items he'd like to discuss.
Yeah, so we've been in contact, or I've been in contact with several organizations. As you know, Mr. Ike, Mr. Gress, and I were still scheduled to go out to Las Vegas to the Recon Conference, which is the retail conference, or the Recon out there, and that was canceled. However, ICSC, the International Council for Shopping Centers, is all over this, and they are very concerned about how this will affect retail developments in communities throughout the state of Missouri, and are actually urging mayors to get their councils or boards to consider a resolution sent to the governor, because the good of the bill, the omnibus bill, is outweighed tremendously by the bad that is within the bill. Not only have I heard from ICSC, I've heard from the Missouri Municipal League. Mr. Hafner, our state representative, and I had a long conversation about it. He encouraged that I move in that direction to try to get our council to support a resolution sent to the governor advocating for a veto. City of Harrisonville is considering the same thing before their Board of Aldermen. They've even received, I think there were 30 legislators that signed a letter and sent to the governor asking him to veto it. Because it's just poor legislation. I think there's been a discussion by several of them that it is so flawed that it could actually be contested in court, in a court of law. So it really is a bad piece of legislation, not just to mention what Mr. Fearborn talked about, the ambiguity part, which with regard to, okay, if we do have to take it to a vote of the people, who do we take it to? Do we take it to the region concerned where the CID or TDD is being developed, or do we take it to the entire community? That, again, is another legal battle that will probably be fought down the road if it's signed into law. So I have actually asked Mr. Fearborn to prepare and have Mr. Zer prepare a resolution for your consideration at our next meeting, simply because I have never heard so much in the past from these legitimate organizations that feel like it will harm our ability to grow with regard to retail. So I wanted to let you all know that, and I know there are probably questions about other things that Mr. Zer had maybe talked about, so I'd open it up for discussion. Mr. Burke.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Question on the omnibus bill. Is this also the same bill that had language to do away with the Clean Missouri Act that the voters passed, or is that a different omnibus bill?
There were a number of omnibus bills. In fact, our firm alone has been looking at a couple of them separate from this one as it would relate to, for example, payday loan options and the availability and allowance for those. So I think it may have fallen in one of the others. I did not see it directly referenced in this one.
Thanks.
Mr. Townsend, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Particular to the TDD and the CID portions of this bill, should this not get vetoed and becomes law, how will that impact going forward with our efforts with the highway project?
It would, if we form a TDD to do the bridge portion of the highway project, which is a significant discussion between Cass County, us, and the city of Belton, because all of those businesses, especially on our side of the highway, are pristine. They have no additional tax put on them. They're in no districts whatsoever, and that includes Walmart. Walmart definitely stands to benefit from that. What it does is, first, it puts in the conflict between the TDD and the CID acts is still there. If that got settled, And I could see the back and forth on it being, okay, we're not going to permit any under the acts until the legal battles associated with this get straightened out. Let's say the intent of this legislature goes through and it requires a vote of the entire people. One of the things that I brought up to our team was we get complimented by a number of developers, up to and including our latest very, very large organization that wants to come in here, on being very nimble, being able to make decisions quickly, get things through quickly. If this required a vote of the entire people, we only vote 3 times a year. So we go into a significant slowdown mode as far as, and I don't even know what that legislation would look like. Are they voting on the development agreement itself? Are they voting on, is a TDD allowed to exist within the following geographical boundaries? All of that would remain to be seen, but it would slow us down considerably. And on something like the bridge project associated with the highway widening project, it could have a significant impact on it. And I don't even know what the vote would look like. Would it go to Belton first and then us? Would it be all one vote at the exact same time? Would it be at the county level? I just don't know.
Thank you.
If I could real quickly, I could also see it going where you'd need a majority within the district itself, and you'd need a majority within the city that it's included within as well, much like you would have for an annexation vote, which is going to just continue to complicate the issues in being able to operate the TDD or the CDD.
Follow-up to that, is there any while we're getting a resolution from the cities, municipalities, and the council, is there any similar resolution that could be brought up from the transportation perspective? Or I don't know if Mark is engaged in that aspect, the impacts particular for our efforts on the highway, the bridge, and the freeway widening, and I'm sure there's probably similar within the region.
I know that the ED groups are gathering forces for a statewide letter to come from them. I had written to Richard Sheets about this, and Richard had indicated all the litany of groups that are weighing in on this, asking the governor to veto. Then, kind of ominous, he puts at the end of the sentence that, be aware, however, that this has considerable House leadership support, which is a little bit surprising, actually.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Burke?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Are there, for us, there are times that developments come in where it's one owner that owns the entire area, and maybe they don't even live there. So in that kind of situation, there wouldn't be a vote of the people that live there, and then, because it's not really affecting anyone.
There's actually a vote. It's not the people who live there, it's the property owners. May have misspoke on that.
Okay.
I may have misspoke on that.
But-
Yeah, it is a vote of the property owners within the district.
But-
So, for instance, we've had a couple of these with Mr. Good and Mr.
Right.
Otis, and they were the only 2 people who voted.
That's what I thought, okay. Yeah, then that would certainly make things so much more complicated to ever get anything done.
Mr. Holman?
Thank you, sir. I'm certainly in support of the council signing off on a resolution to send up. Do we have any kind of feeling on what Governor Parsons' current view is towards this? Or we're working from behind the 8 ball or right alongside it?
No, actually, he's been kind of pulled from a lot of different directions, and I think he's fully aware of the turmoil that this caused. And his inability to have the line item veto makes it tough for him, actually, because of his, he can't get the ugly stuff out. So I think he is seriously considering it. And I think the more that he gets from legitimate organizations who oppose it, it makes it easier for him to make the decision to veto the bill.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Thank you all. That concludes the, I guess we have another other. Mr. Townsend, did you have anything you wanted to bring up, sir? Under other?
And not to belabor the evening, I know we're trying to get out of here rather quickly, but I've had a few calls today, given the backdrop that we're in today, with the protests and everyone responding to the unfortunate death of Mr. George Floyd. And some of the questions I've been asked has been kind of what's the city's leadership's response, and how are we poised or reacting to the situation, to the environment. And while I did not necessarily, this is not something that I wanted to talk about just because of what it is. It's here. It's been here. This is unfortunate that something like this has happened before. And one thing I just want, not a history lesson, but one thing that speaks to the situation, speaks to the narrative that we're in right now. And I'll read a quick passage from Dr. Martin Luther King from 57 years ago. It says, "We now, through painful experience, that freedom is never voluntarily given by the oppressor. It must be demanded by the oppressed. Frankly, I have never yet engaged in a direct action movement that was well-timed, or according to the timetable of those who have not suffered unduly from the disease of segregation. For years now, I have heard the word wait. It rings in the ear of every Negro with a piercing familiarity. This wait has almost always meant never. It has been a tranquilizing thaliodome, relieving the emotional stress for a moment, only to give birth to the ill-formed infant frustration." And I think that quick little passage kind of speaks to what we're feeling today, what a lot of people are feeling today, in what's going on. And while it was generated from the inappropriate actions of police officers, as I had conversations with others, and I had conversations with the mayor, and questions on how is our police responding? How are our police being trained? How are our police? How do we weed out those bad apples that may exist? How do we police our own in that regard? I use that term in my time in the Marine Corps. How do we police our own? And the question, and it was eloquently spoken of by our mayor and former chief of police. Our police force is small, so you can't hide. And when it does raises its head, it's quickly discarded. And I believe you've had that done, not necessarily under the theme of what we're experiencing today, but when that bad apple is identified, they're removed. And we learn from it, and we move on. So we have the luxury as a small community to learn from what's going on around us and take the opportunity to physically sit down and have conversations and just, talk it out, figure out some ways to learn from each other. Because whether it's racism or whether it's bias, whether it's a taught acting or activity or feeling, or it's say, I just don't know, because I've never been around it, I've never experienced it. Some of the things that in my short time here in this community, I've heard and dealt with people who, as they moved into the community, they felt the pressures and the, well, you're not from here, why are you here? When they're trying to while they're trying to establish business in the community, I've heard comments where they've been charged higher rates than someone else. Now, our community has grown, and our community surveys have proven that our residents are comfortable, they feel safe. It's reflected in our census. We're growing. While the ethnic demographic is small, everyone still feels welcome. And I'm not naive to the impact that there may still be some racism and some bias there. I'm not accusing anyone of that. I'm not accusing anyone of the force of that. But it's just as we move forward, as we figure out a way how to respond in this climate. I believe there was a small protest in Raymore and Willow Wind, I believe it was. And that was just because the children had questions and they wanted to do something. And the family went out and did something. And that was appropriate. And that was what we as a society allowed to be done, to allow to be heard. And I appreciate you allowing you to hear me, because it is something that whether I was, while I am a black man, while I do have family and friends who fit the description, but if you were to take the time to talk to them, you would quickly realize, oh, you're a business owner. Oh, you're a teacher. Oh, you're a deacon. Oh, you're a bishop. Oh, you're a, put a tag on that name. That's all it takes, is just to have some respect. And so that's what I see as you look at those who are protesting peacefully, and then some who may take it to an extreme and may take it to the violent realm. It's just wanting to have that respect. And so as our community and as our leadership, myself included, find ways how to have that conversation, whether it be, and necessarily not, it may not want to force a conversation if it's not necessary, but be open to it. And I'm not saying that we haven't had that chance, but if that does bring, the conversation comes up, I'm willing to have it, and just see the dialogue and have the dialogue and see where we can go from there. If those who want to have that conversation and learn from each other and how we can make our community even better than it is today. So that's what I wanted to kind of speak to those who asked of me, and then also from my personal perspective, just to kind of talk through what's the narrative that's out there today and how we can kind of, as a community, find ways to come to an agreement. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, sir. And I'd actually asked Chief Zimmerman to join us tonight in the event because of what's gone on over the weekend. If she would care to share how she has brought her department to a point that is, we think, is an extremely inclusive department and acts in the same fashion. So, Chief, I don't know if you have anything you want to add to that statement of Mr. Townsend's, or?
And I've asked Chief, her and I conferred this morning, I've asked Chief to make more people watch the regular council meeting, so the entire portion of staff reports next Monday night is going to be a presentation on the extensive amount of items that have been done. And I'm going to have Chief kind of respond real briefly tonight, if you don't mind. I will say something because one of the things that I view as the city manager when I look at our police department, and in fact, all of our departments, you've heard it before, attitude reflects leadership. And we have no finer group of leaders than the command staff in our police department. Simple term, it will not be tolerated. And it comes out in everything they do every single day. With that, I'm going to turn it over to the chief.
Thank you, Mr. Fearborn. And thank you, Councilman Townsend, for bringing it up. Obviously, it's something that weighs heavy on the minds of all of us. And I know the mayor can tell you this, Councilman Holman, any police officer that has any integrity and believes in what we do wouldn't tolerate the behavior of the officers in Minneapolis. We are as sickened by what happened there as any average citizen. But to your point, and what happened on Saturday, which was absolutely a wonderful demonstration of the citizens that reside here in Raymore. The protest, if you will, if you want to call it a protest, was really just, some individuals out expressing their opinion and had some signs about equal justice, which we all believe in. And I would like to tell a quick story that one of our officers actually stopped a car there close to where the individuals were at in front of Willowind, and they offered our officer a bottle of water after he was finished with his car check. And so I'm so proud of not only our department, but obviously our citizens. And we have had, and you mentioned this, and I'm really pleased to say, those of you in the room who know Calvin Acklin, Calvin and I worked very closely together to have a number of dialogues here in the community surrounding Ferguson. And he has reached out to me again, and I'm so pleased that he has, because, you know, we felt like we got busy and we went off in different directions, and we are reinitiating those conversations. And so we had probably an hour-long conversation today, just to talk about, you know, where we go from here and how we start that conversation again. He and I both feel very strongly that it's about the community knowing where your heart is, and the community understanding who you are and what you believe in. And it's not just about me, and he understands that, and I'm sure you all do too, that when the community needs the police department, it's not me that's going to show up at your door. It's the people who work for me that will come. And so it's absolutely critical that they believe what I believe. And Mr. Fearborn's right, that we don't tolerate inappropriate behavior in any form or fashion. And I will talk, you know, at length next Monday night during my presentation about some of the things that we've been doing all along, and that's the training that our officers get, you know, with regard to all sorts of, you know, whether it's diversity or racial profiling or de-escalation techniques. And I had an interesting conversation with a citizen this afternoon who wanted to know what we're doing here in Raymore. And he had left me a message over the weekend, and I returned his call this afternoon. And he really was interested in, and he said some of the same things. He said, I feel very safe here. I've lived here for a long time, and I feel like I'm very safe. But I just wanted to know, you know, what the police department is doing and has been doing all along. He said, because, you know, he said, I've had interactions with the police. He said, you know, they'll come, you know, my music's too loud or things like that. But I told him, I said, we have a mantra, maybe for lack of a better term, you know, here, that we're always looking for voluntary compliance. I don't think you would ever hear of a situation where, you know, much like the Minneapolis officers that were heavy-handed, that we are taking an aggressive approach with any citizens for any reason. And because we don't tolerate that, that is something that our officers carry with them every day. So again, I'm not only proud of the police department, but I'm really proud of the community, because they every day demonstrate the willingness to work with us doing a pretty tough job.
Just a caveat to that, Chief and Mr. Freeborn, I appreciate it. And not only is it in your words, it's also in your deeds. The deeds of the officers, the deeds of the staff exhibit that. And I appreciate that, and I thank you for that, and I thank you for the continued training. I thank you for the continued conversations to make sure that everyone feels the same safety in the community. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chief. Anyone else have anything? Sonia?
Just real quick, I want to thank you for bringing up the conversation. It is an important conversation and something that I think, you know, we do need to talk about. We need to open that conversation. We're not going to finish the conversation tonight, of course, but it needs to be ongoing. And just one thing to add to what Chief said, citizens in Raymore are welcome to ride along with police officers. If they want to see what's going on the streets of Raymore, if they want to have a conversation with an officer, the doors are always open. We have the Citizens Police Academy, another great way for people in Raymore to learn about what's going on in our police department. So I would just encourage everyone in the city, in this room, to continue having the conversation, continue asking questions, and that's the only way we're going to learn about what we're thinking, how we're feeling, and get it all out on the table so that we can get along better and feel better about what's happening in our world. Thanks.
Anyone else? Mr. Ullman?
Thank you, sir. One thing I think the chief and Mr. Fearborn touched on a little bit, probably a lot of people don't know other than outside of you and them, Mr. Ackland was instrumental during the same type of emotions and questions that came up during the Ferguson riots. And he did a ton of work very quietly and behind the scenes, as was one of the most stand-up guys that you would know here in the city that nobody knew about. And he's still active. He's on planning and zoning. And between him and Reggie, two of the finest guys in the world that could lead up a conversation like this. So we're blessed in that we have a couple of individuals that are incredibly level-headed and willing to take on any task that would be needed if the situation arose. So we've got some really good resources in the toolbox, sir.
Mr. Burke?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Wanted to thank Mr. Townsend for bringing up the subject. I watched Mayor Lucas and the police chief on TV trying to have a conversation with protesters today, and it's so frustrating when I know that both people on the side, on either side of that conversation, agreed with each other, but they couldn't de-escalate their own emotions enough to listen to each other and talk about it. And my dad, between my father and I, he started teaching in the late 60s, and I've been teaching, and every time something like this happens, where it really affects our community is in the schools. And it's very difficult to help move this in the right, move these conversations in the right way with juveniles. And that might be an opportunity for our police force to talk about it in schools. I don't know what would be appropriate. I'm not an expert or anything, but because the more opportunities that we have to have calm conversations when things are not on fire, literally or otherwise, because that's the only way it's gotten better in our lifetime, is people have had these conversations and experiences, and then they compare that we all have more in common than we have differences. And but it is very difficult to be in a position of authority and try to talk to someone who is upset and not have them immediately say, well, you're the authority, so we can't agree. And I think that's something that we could definitely maybe move in that direction somehow.
Okay, if there's nothing else, we're adjourned for this evening. Thank you, everybody.